Hello everyone, Jax West from Stephen Avery Project, Justice with Jax and MAM Gossip. I just got from the clerk the Kathleen's response. So I will read that through with y'all now. I haven't read it yet, so this is the first time I'm learning of it as well. This is 60 pages long, and I will not be responding to anybody's comments or questions as I'm looking at my phone reading this. So at the top of it, it says motion to reply to motion for strike. Defendant appellant's motion for leave to file reply to the state's response to motion to stay, appeal, and remand instanter. The defendant appellant, Stephen Avery, by his undersigned attorneys, Kathleen T. Zellner and Stephen G. Richards, hereby moves this court for leave to file his reply to the state's response to his motion to stay this appeal and remand. In support thereof, Mr. Avery states as follows. 1. On April 12, 2021, Mr. Avery filed a motion to stay this appeal following the discovery of new evidence establishing a Brady violation and a third-party Denny suspect. The motion asks this court to remand the case to the circuit court for Mr. Avery to file a supplemental post-conviction motion. 2. On April 16, 2021, the state filed a response in opposition to the motion. 3. On April 22, 2021, Mr. Avery filed a reply to the state's response. See reply attached to this motion. 4. On April 27, 2021, the state filed a motion to strike Mr. Avery's reply. The motion relies on Wisconsin Statute 809.14, State versus Quackenbush, and Bilda versus County of Milwaukee, for the proposition that a party must seek leave from this court before filing a reply to a response. 5. Neither the rule nor the cases cited by the state explicitly prohibit the filing of a reply to a response to a motion, nor do those authorities require leave of court before doing so. 6. Indeed, the state filed responses in opposition to each of Mr. Avery's 3 previous motions to remand, to which Mr. Avery filed replies without leave of court. The state did not object to the filing of any of those replies, and this court considered each of them. 7. Nevertheless, out of an abundance of caution, if leave from this court is required before filing a reply, Mr. Avery seeks leave to file the attached reply. 8. Leave should be granted to file the reply in the interest of justice, as the state's response casts false aspersions concerning the extent to which defense counsel investigated the new evidence before filing the motion to stay and remand. Moreover, the state presents legal arguments as to why the appeal should not be stayed, which, absent leave to file a reply, Mr. Avery will have no chance to address. Wherefore, Mr. Avery respectfully requests that this court grant him leave to file the attached reply instanter, dated this 28th day of April 2021. Respectfully submitted, Kathleen Zellner and Stephen Richards. Next page is the certificate of service. And so then the rest of it is what we already know, but I guess we'll read through that too. Defendant appellant's reply to the state's response to motion to stay, appeal, and remand. The defendant appellant, Stephen Avery, by his undersigned attorneys, Kathleen T. Zellner and Stephen G. Richards, for his reply to the state's response in opposition to his motion to stay the appeal and remand, the cause to the circuit court states as follows. Introduction. It is a supreme irony that in one of the most blatant examples of a wrongful conviction, the state's only response is to falsely accuse Mr. Avery's lead counsel of nefarious conduct for discovering a sixth Brady violation. Rather than seeking justice, the state wants to slay the messenger by putting forth more false allegations, a skill that it has mastered over the last 16 years. The state turns a blind eye towards its past actions of withholding exculpatory evidence. When the state disclosed a CD of violent porn from the Dassey Yanda computer 12 years after the CD was created and concealed from prior counsel, the state argued, as it does now, that Mr. Avery was attempting to add new material to his motion. When the state facilitated the destruction in 2011 of evidence it had agreed to allow Mr. Avery to test, the state argued, as it does now, that Mr. Avery was attempting to add new material to his motion. This court did not accept those disingenuous responses then, and it should reject the same disingenuous response now. The state asks this court to overlook the fact that in further violation of discovery, it failed to disclose to Mr. Avery's prior counsel that a former driver who delivered newspapers to the Avery salvage yard in November of 2005 observed two men, including a shirtless Bobby Dassey, the state's primary witness in securing Mr. Avery's conviction, pushing Ms. Halbach's RAV4 down Avery Road prior to its later discovery, in quotes, on the Avery property. In its response, the state states, quote, "It is reasonable to conclude at this point that Mr. Avery is not pursuing these claims in good faith," unquote. However, the state's conclusion is clearly refuted by the procedural history of this case, the veracity of Mr. Sawinski's statements, the supporting affidavits, and the state's history of misconduct. While the state has not been prejudiced in any way by its own misconduct and this court's prior rulings granting Mr. Avery's motions to remand, its response merely mimics its previous responses to Mr. Avery's motions, arguing that Mr. Avery is, quote, dragging this appeal out, unquote, and that he should voluntarily dismiss his pending appeal. It is the state's pattern of concealing and withholding exculpatory evidence that has forced Mr. Avery to delay his appeal numerous times already, delaying his quest for a new trial and eventual freedom. So, what I just read there in that paragraph, this is her response that she had filed on the 22nd. So I'm not going to continue reading that. We have a live already of where I cover that. I'm scrolling now to the bottom just to make sure there isn't any attachments to this that we haven't seen, just in case. The bottom's got the affidavits that we read before. So the affidavit of Kathleen. So it turns out then that this, though it's 60 pages, it's mostly her response that they want, the state wants struck. So I will read again her reply to their motion to strike. And then summarize it, and we'll be able to call this one to a close. The defendant appellant, Stephen Avery, by his undersigned attorneys, Kathleen T. Zellner and Stephen G. Richards, hereby moves this court for leave to file his reply to the state's response to his motion to stay this appeal and remand. In support thereof, Mr. Avery states as follows. 1. On April 12, 2021, Mr. Avery filed a motion to stay his appeal following the discovery of new evidence establishing a Brady violation and a third-party Denny suspect. The motion asks this court to remand the case to the circuit court for Mr. Avery to file a supplemental post-conviction motion. 2. On April 16, 2021, the state filed a response in opposition to the motion. On April 22nd, 2021, Mr. Avery filed a reply to the state's response. On April 27, the state filed a motion to strike Mr. Avery's reply. The motion relies on Wisconsin statute blah 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 for the proposition that a party must seek leave from this court before filing a reply to a response. Neither a rule nor the cases cited by the state explicitly prohibit the filing of a reply to a response to a motion, nor do those authorities require leave of court before doing so. Indeed, the state filed responses in opposition to each of Mr. Avery's 3 previous motions to remand, to which Mr. Avery filed replies without leave of court. The state did not object to the filing of any of those replies, and this court considered each of them. Nevertheless, out of an abundance of caution, if leave from this court is required before filing a reply, Mr. Avery seeks leave to file the attached reply. Leave should be granted to file the reply in the interests of justice, as the state's response casts false aspersions concerning the extent to which defense counsel investigated the new evidence before filing the motion to stay and remand. Moreover, the state presents legal arguments as to why the appeal should not be stayed, which, absent leave to file a reply, Mr. Avery will have no chance to address. Wherefore, Mr. Avery respectfully requests that this court grant him leave to file the attached reply instanter. INSTANTER. So if somebody wants to look that up, instanter, and what that means. So, so all she's stating in here is that the cases that they cited, Tamara, the cases that the state cited to try and say that Kathleen isn't able to respond, hold on one second, are not what the state says, so, and that Kathleen has been able to respond before, and they didn't have an issue with it, and now they do. So, and that nothing is said that they have to go to a lower case. Thank you, Joel. Instanter equals at once or immediately. Okay, that's what I figured. So she's just saying that this isn't something they had to do before, but if you're going to make them do this time, then they want to go to that lower court immediately. That's all. Wherefore, Mr. Avery respectfully requests that this court grant him leave to file the attached reply immediately. At once, immediately. So, that's that. So, out of 60 pages, it was really only 3 pages of something to read. And like I said, the top of it says motion to reply to motion to strike. So since the state is saying she has to ask permission to reply, she's now asking for that permission, even though she didn't have to do it before, and the cases they cited doesn't say that. And to me, this is more of the state who's claiming that Kathleen and Stephen are just dragging this out. They're the ones that are dragging it out. why wouldn't you want to hear the evidence from this alleged witness? Isn't it supposed to be about the justice for Teresa? So if there is really a witness who tried way back then, the day Teresa's car was found, to tell you what he knew, you just would think, no matter who you are, in this case, state, Halbach family, etc., that you would want to know the truth on that. So I don't know what the next step is here, because I'm not basically a lawyer. I don't pretend to be a lawyer. I just read to you what we get from the court. So I don't know if this volleys back to the state, and now the state is going to say why I think you shouldn't grant her this, blah, 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 or if we're now waiting for the judge to rule. And I would think on these things, common sense to me would be that the judge doesn't have however much time they want to respond to this. I would think we should have to have a limit on how long it could take. But this is not Stephen or Kathleen that's dragging this case out. This is the state and the court. Kathleen's ready to go. She's got witnesses all ready. If she was able to get the bones that she found out that the state lied about and gave to the Halbach family, she's got the expert that could have tested those bones that were found at the gravel pit and tell you if that was Teresa Halbach. But they tampered with that evidence, and now those bones are gone. And the RAV4, there's fingerprints on that RAV4. And we've never heard or thought before of Bobby Dassey pushing the RAV4, and that he had a co-conspirator with him. So are those unknown fingerprints around the driver's door and the passenger door? So can those fingerprints lead us to who is the man that Sowinski saw with Bobby Dassey? If the state doesn't want to take the time or the money to test the RAV, Kathleen's ready to go. Give it to her. Sonia says, and a palm print on that RAV. Yeah, it's your palm that's on that car as you're pushing it, right? We want justice for Teresa Halbach. And that also means justice for Stephen Avery, who has been sitting in prison for something he didn't do. Why wouldn't you look at all the evidence? All the real evidence doesn't point to Stephen. Everything that's sketchy and planted, everything is twisted and turned to try and point at Stephen. Laura, all you've missed is, so the 60 pages that I just got, most of it is her response from before that the state wants struck. So there was only 3 pages of her saying that they've never said before in the times when they've responded to the state that they had to ask permission for that, and that the cases that they had cited that she has to ask permission, that's not what those cases say. And fine, if they want him to ask permission, then he's asking permission now, or go ahead and move it to the lower court and do it immediately. Let's stop wasting time here. But I don't understand why, if you're looking for justice, you would want this struck. But if you're just trying to set up an innocent man, you want to shut down any witness. Rebecca, they found bone, but it's never been identified as Teresa Halbach. It said it was consistent with Karen Halbach, her mother. Correct? If I'm remembering that correctly? Nothing said 100% that those bones were Teresa Halbach. And then the bones that were at the gravel pit are what Kratz testified to in saying, we don't even know if these are human, so we're not even going to talk about these bones. But then a couple years later, the state gives those bones to the family to bury like it's Teresa. So, which you're not allowed to do. You cannot just give away evidence. As long as somebody is incarcerated, the evidence has to remain there, unless the person who is incarcerated gives you permission to do so. Stephen didn't give you permission to give those bones to the Halbach family. And the state had even been in talks with Kathleen, because Kathleen wanted the bones in the car. And they said they would give it to her. So she had no clue that years before, they had given the bones to the Halbach family. So they were lying to Kathleen and saying, yep, we'll give them to you. Because they knew they gave them away. So, so the state does that, and they want to now claim that Kathleen responding to their motion is a bad thing to do. No worries, Jen. So I don't know what the next step is. I'm assuming we're waiting for the judge to rule on this crap. Jennifer, don't know what the Halbach family did with the bones. It's assumed they cremated them because the other bones were cremated, allegedly. So I don't know, there is, I've been to the cemetery and have posted pictures and video of being at the cemetery at Teresa's grave. So she does have a head, well, her headstone has her mother and her uncle on one side, her daddy uncle. So it has her mother and her daddy uncle on one side, and then Teresa is on the back. I do not know if that is just a headstone with her name on it or if her remains are buried there. And so I don't know if the 5 years later they dug that up to put the gravel pit bones there. I'm not sure. I don't know if anybody knows what happened with the bones for sure. We just know that Kratz in court claimed that those bones were not Teresa, didn't even know if they were human, because his theory is that Stephen never left the salvage yard. And for these bones to be way down yonder at the gravel pit, that's a huge hole in his theory. So that's why these aren't the bones you're looking for. Don't look at these bones. Let's pivot this way. But then they give the bones to the Halbach family. So, was that to cover evidence? Because can't test them now. It's gone. So that should tell you right then and there, how can Stephen get a fair trial? Ever. You lied about those bones in court. Thank you, Lynn. All we know is that they signed the bones out. Don't know for sure what happened to them. And know that Karen Halbach is the one that signed to accept the bones at the funeral home. That's all there is. So, how can Stephen get a fair trial when you can never test these bones? Because if those bones at the gravel pit are Teresa Halbach, then everything the state prosecuted Stephen for didn't happen. Because how are those bones there when you said he never left? And you're claiming that the bones were never burned somewhere else first and moved to Stephen's. So how are those bones over there? And why would Stephen, if he were to commit this murder, go to the gravel pit to burn her, then scoop up her bones, put them in his burn barrels, and move them back to his house, and then sprinkle them in his burn pit? Why would you do that? When they're at the gravel pit, that's not your property. Why would you then take them from the gravel pit and bring them to your property? So wouldn't it be the reverse if this were Stephen and he was to do it at his own home and burn her in her burn pit, and then you would scoop up the bones and then you'd go to the gravel pit to get rid of them? So then wouldn't the bulk of the bones be at the gravel pit and you would just find bits and pieces still at his place? Oh, Debbie can comment on Stephen Avery Project. I don't understand why this is different here, Debbie. I do the live the same way here than I would do there. So I don't get Facebook. Sorry. Right, Rebecca? You would move them off your property. Same thing with the vehicle. All right. Why would Stephen just leave that car on their property? Why would Stephen go to Crivets if he has the car that he knows people are looking for on his property when he has a car crusher there? So if he did it and he can't use the car crusher during the weekdays when everybody is there, well, they're all going to Crivets. So when they all go, I will crush this car. Then I'm going to take what remains of the crushed car, put it inside of another car, crush that, poof, it's gone. Or that little road at the very end of Avery Salvage, where Teresa's RAV was planted, there's that pond right in front of it. It's deep enough that you could have completely submerged that car. So if you're knowing they're going to do, flyover, you could have driven that right into that pond right there and nobody would see the car from the air. It'd be completely gone. Or the quarry that's right on the other side of the salvage yard. I've driven through there. There's lots of trees, really huge, tall, like evergreen trees with big branches that you could drive a car completely underneath that tree and leave it there. And nobody would find it. So even if you're going to leave it temporarily, so maybe Stephen can't use the car crusher and he'll use it when the family goes to Crivets, he could have taken it in right behind the salvage yard and drove it under a tree so it's not on his property. Also, something that Stephen pointed out, where the RAV4 was planted, all the older cars are at the back of the pit, and the newer cars are up closer by the garage. So this further made this car completely stand out. And it was double parked and facing the opposite direction from all the other vehicles. And it's then the only car that has stuff put on top of it. It's a giant over here. Here it is. And parking it on that road, that little, it's not even a road, it's just grass there. And you can, maybe I should post it here in Stephen Avery Project. I did just post an MAM Gossip today, the video I took when I walked the Pam of God path. And also, so then you can see right there on the other side of the pond on where the car had been. But the car totally stands out there. And if you had just parked it then up by all the newer cars, nobody would have noticed it. It would have fit right in there. Stephen knows where the cars get parked, what's old down here and the new up there. And then also you had Earl driving the golf cart, his mom's golf cart, throughout there shooting at stuff. And he says he went down that section and it wasn't there at that time, after the 3rd, or after the 31st. So Stephen allegedly murders this girl for no reason, because he has a girlfriend that he sees regularly and talks to regularly, and they have a decent relationship. He's about to get $400,000 from for being wrongfully convicted. This is separate from the $36 million lawsuit. So this was $400,000 he was going to be getting in December, just a month later. So he was going to be coming into a whole lot of money. Depositions had just started in his $36 million suit. So now there's all that money on top of the $400,000. So he has a girlfriend. He's got his freedom. He's got money. He organizes for Teresa Halbach to come take pictures of Barb's car by calling Auto Trader, even though he has Teresa's phone number and could have just called her directly. He has had Teresa come out several times before. Of course, Teresa would give him her phone number, because the way she is paid by Auto Trader, she gets $10 a car. But if it's what is called a hustle shot, so it's not something that came through Auto Trader, it is somebody that she coerces into selling their car through Auto Trader, she gets $20. She gets double the money if they go through her and not Auto Trader. So Stephen, as the state likes to show you, oh, see, look, Stephen's got Teresa's phone number written down on a piece of paper in his house. Yeah, because obviously she would prefer Stephen go through her for any vehicle, because he's a gold mine. You know, it's a junkyard that Stephen loved fixing these cars up and trying to sell them. So that's money in her pocket. Easy money. So Stephen, call me. Don't call Auto Trader. But Stephen calls Auto Trader. Why? Because this is a car that he's selling for his sister. So because they bring to you a bill of sale to use if you sell the car now through Auto Trader. And so that's the name that's on the title. So he calls Auto Trader and, says B. Yonda. Nothing shady about that when he's trying to hide his identity. No, he's saying whose car it is because that's who title it is and that's who people are going to be contacting and dealing with, Barb. And he gives the address. And you know that Teresa had talked to somebody at Auto Trader saying she knew she was going to the salvage yard. Nothing was hidden. So if Stephen is so deranged that he's going to murder this girl who had nothing to do with him being wrongfully convicted and serving 18 years, because, if he's just going to murder somebody because he's so angry, it wouldn't be his cousin or her friend that put him in there for Bernston. He calls Auto Trader so people know she's coming. He tells the family so the family knows she's coming. The Barb had told the boys to clean the van for the picture the next day. Everybody knew this woman was coming. She's coming on a Monday in the middle of the workday at a working business that people just walk through the salvage yard looking for parts. So anybody at any time during that day would be there. So if you're shooting or somebody's screaming, people could hear. And then knowing that his family is all going to Crivets on the Saturday, so this happens on Monday, the family's all leaving on Saturday, he goes to Crivets, knowing people are looking for this girl who had been on his property, and leaves all this evidence that can be found. $0. Zero. I believe there is some law enforcement that truly believed Stephen was guilty, and they were helping frame a guilty man. That people may have felt that due to the deposition and the first time they screwed him over, there'd be no way they'd be able to get him on this. So I believe that not the people that were involved in Bernston case, but other officers believed Stephen was guilty. And then they just don't look at the facts. They're not investigating anything. They're just going to make the puzzle pieces fit Stephen. Bobby Dassey, Stephen said that Bobby always noticed the days Teresa Halbach was there and would comment to Stephen about it and like make fun and say, "Oh, your girlfriend's coming today," or "Your girlfriend was here today." So Bobby is always noticing when Teresa Halbach has been at the salvage yard. 1. 2, his computer. His family can try to deny that computer all they want. They can try and say it wasn't in Bobby's room when the state's own pictures show the computer in Bobby's bedroom. Bobby's brothers have said the computer was in Bobby's room. Did the other boys use the computer? Sure did. But at the times those things were being put on that computer is only when Bobby Dassey is there. Barb likes to say, boys will be boys. Boys are going to look up disgusting things. No. There were things on that computer that said Teresa Halbach, that said RAV4. Blood, DNA. Women and children being beheaded, raped. No, Scott would not have used that computer. At that time, Scott and Barb were having an affair and had been having an affair for a year. Barb was married to Tom Yanda, Scott's cousin. So Tom had lived in that trailer. Scott obviously isn't going to be hanging out at that trailer. Barb would go to Scott's trailer. Scott didn't even know the Dassey boys at this time, other than Bobby, because he and Bobby belonged to the same hunt club. The two of them like killing stuff. So he wasn't going to Avery family functions and all that. Barb was married to his cousin. So Scott absolutely was not part of what was on that computer, in my opinion. Now, Stephen has said that he did see Scott there during the day, sometimes visiting with Bobby. So, because Bobby works the night shift and he gets off of work at 6 a.m., Scott is like hit or miss when he works. So, Scott's available during the day. Rachel is saying, what was on Stephen's computer? Nothing like that. I know that he had some pictures of Jody. He had some pictures of his ex-wife. And he had a home video of him and Jody having sex. But nothing like what Bobby had on his computer, which Barb and Carla like to try and point that finger at either Tom Yanda, her ex-husband, or they've even pointed the finger at Stephen. That Stephen could have gone over there, and that makes zero sense on why Stephen would go to Barb's house to look at porn when he had his own computer and his girlfriend was in jail. So he was living alone. So wouldn't he be looking at porn in the privacy of his own home and not going next door to where his nephew is sleeping from working the night shift? And that Stephen had a pretty regular routine of working at the salvage yard on the weekdays from 8 to 5 or whatever it was. You know, so Stephen would work and he would take a lunch break, that he would have lunch with his mom every day. And this day, the only reason he was home is because he was going to meet Teresa to take pictures of the car and to pay her the $40 or whatever it was that he had to pay Auto Trader. And then you could see from his phone records that he had talked to, Jody's lawyer while he was home during the day. Tammy, I'm not related to Steven. I am just a supporter. Lynn says, Steve even admitted that he watched porn and subscribed to those types of TV channels. He's a grown man, so watching porn on subscribed TV channels doesn't make you a murderer. Right. But that's what... So they're looking into Steven's stuff to see any porn, and then also the pink fuzzy handcuffs makes him a murderer. But Bobby Dassey having those things on his computer doesn't. Natalie says, did Steve take Bear in at night, or was he outside dog all the time? He was not an outside dog all the time. I'm not sure if Steven brought Bear in, but okay, so in MAM Gossip, we have been watching, starting at 1 o'clock every day, we've been watching Making a Murderer together. And so yesterday was Jody is out and she was at the trailer, and in the scene she was on the phone, and you can see Bear is laying down on the floor inside the trailer. So I believe Jody may have been, more of a, I don't want the dog outside, bring the dog inside. And Steven might have been more, the dog is outside. But I don't know that for sure. That would be a good question to ask Steven. So if any of you have communication with Steven or you write him, go ahead and ask him that. Did Bear come inside with him at night, or did he stay outside? What does Lynn say? There's clearly a huge difference between TV porn and what was found on Dassey computer. Absolutely. So Steven didn't have anything in his trailer that would make him out to be this sick individual that would do something like this. But there is on Bobby's. And for people like watching Sheriff Peterson saying things like Steven's crimes just progressed, and maybe he never should have gotten out because then Teresa wouldn't be killed, blah, blah, blah. They keep trying to make it out like he was this danger to society and using the Bernstein case for that. But Steven didn't do that. Steven doesn't have anything in his history showing he abused anyone. The cat. Threw the cat in the fire. Well, Steven's not the one who threw the cat in the fire. Somebody else did. There were multiple people at the bonfire that night, including Pete Dassey, Barb's husband. Steve was there. But he's not the one that threw the cat in the fire. But he gets the blame for it. I don't like that he was even there and they're all laughing about it. I don't like things being killed. So, okay, Steven the greatest guy in the world. No, but the situation with that cat does not mean Steven's going to murder women. The only thing they have is what happened with his cousin, Sandra Morris, that he pointed a gun at her after she's spreading all these lies and rumors about him. I believe the gun wasn't even loaded. Dick move. Not a cool thing to do. Doesn't mean he's going to murder anybody. Stephen took the blame for it, Victoria. And I can't remember who it was that actually did it, but they have said since then that they are the ones that did it, and Stephen just took the blame for it. So it's again showing Stephen, if he does something, he's going to say, so he took the blame for the cat. But now we wait. We've got these, the new witness, which Kathleen had included in her other filing, that Blaine filed an affidavit saying he saw his brother Bobby driving a blue-green vehicle on 147 when they were coming home on the bus. So Blaine saw him with a blue-green vehicle. Brian, his brother Brian, said Bobby told him he saw Teresa leave. Barb posted on social media that Bobby saw Teresa leave. Scott says in an angry phone call with Stephen that he was never on the property that day. So now putting everything he says as questionable. You said you were never there that day? Yet you're testifying that you and Bobby crisscross at exactly such and such a time? And then when you go there late at night, or later that night, you see a 10-foot tall fire? The two people whose stories always change are Scott and Bobby. The people who remain consistent are 1, Stephen, 2, Brendan, when he's allowed to say what he wants. When Brendan writes out, here's what happened, and they go, Michael O'Kelly goes, is Teresa in that? No, you need to redo this and write it this way. And here, draw here you stabbing her. And draw here how she was tied to the bed. And the picture Brendan draws of her tied to the bed does not match how they claim she was tied up. There was nothing pink and fuzzy in his picture. It was chain link and rope. Stephen and Brendan are consistent on what happened on October 31st, 2005. Bobby and Scott, change. Hope Bobby is not on social media. He stays silent. The only time you hear anything about Bobby is Barb posting it, saying, Bobby told me this. James says, asked if Scott used their computer because someone was searching porn on the Dassey computer when Bobby was off driving the blue-green Ford Ranger belonging to Scott. Plot thickens. Nope, Michael, not related to any of the Averys. I'm just a supporter. I watched Making a Murderer like the rest of you and saw an injustice. That's it. All right, so let me summarize again for the people who are on here late. I did read at the beginning of this Kathleen's response to the state wanting her prior response struck from the record. And so she's basically saying everything they're saying on that, the cases they cited, is not actual, and that she never had to ask permission before to respond to a state's reply, and that if they want her to ask permission or to go to a lower court, fine, let's do that immediately. Let's just get this done. So I'll post I'm not going to upload the whole thing because there's no point, because it was 60 pages long, but only 3 pages of it is the new stuff. Everything else in it was the old stuff. So I'll just take screenshots of those 3 pages and post them so you can read it yourself if you would like. And then I'm assuming we're waiting to hear from the judge to rule on this. I don't know if the state now is going to respond to Kathleen's blah blah blah. You know, this back and forth dragging things out is driving me crazy. And I can't imagine what it does to Stephen. This constant waiting. I talked to another one of Kathleen Zellner's clients, Melissa Kaluzinski, who, if you want to look into the Melissa Kaluzinski case, Kathleen's got a page for it on her website, KathleenTZellner.com. I email with Melissa like every other day. And so an email I got from Melissa today talked about how much she just really wants to go home, and how this waiting and everything just, and so this last year has been really hard on Melissa because of COVID, that she has not been able to see her family in a year. And so due to COVID, she's staying mostly in her room. So what do you have to do? You keep thinking about your case. So in hearing the things that Melissa talks about, I have to imagine Stephen has to be feeling something like that as well. That, you know, he can't have the contact with his friends and family other than phone and Stephen doesn't email, I don't believe. So other than phone, so he hasn't been able to see or touch any of his friends or family in over a year. And to have this constant start and stop and waiting, because Melissa is waiting for a judge's ruling too, from when we went to court. Gosh, I mean, a long time ago we went to court for Melissa, pre-COVID, and we're still waiting. So, and Stephen getting these new witnesses that they totally overlooked or buried. When Sawinski calls and talks to a female, that I saw this car being pushed, and they don't even talk to him. Because maybe he was going to say that Stephen was there too. Or him saying he saw Bobby and some other guy doing it. That could have been Stephen. Or maybe Bobby is pushing the car for Stephen. It could have helped their narrative against Stephen, that a family member is pushing the car. You would think you would want to look into that. But no, they were focused on, we're going to pin this on Stephen, and this is how it's going to get done. We do have a pinned post that lists where you can write to Stephen. He is at Waupun Correctional. So we do have in a pinned post, I can't recall where it is on Stephen Avery Project. We'll post it again for you guys on where you can write to both Stephen and Brendan. But the thing that I always say, if you are going to write to Stephen or Brendan, just know they may not write you back. So do not get upset with them if you do not get a letter back. They have so many people that write to them. And they've been burned by people before who then want to sell their letters. So, but yes, write to them, and you make it so you're looking at it as you're trying to be a bright spot in their crappy day. You know, so don't write them a letter all doom and gloom and you feel sorry for them and obsess on the case. Tell them about yourself, you know, where you live, children, pets, you know, because Brendan, you know, really loves animals. So with Brendan, you can talk about pets. And with Stephen, you know, he likes cars. You could talk to him about cars. Brendan really loves video games, music, poetry, jokes. You know, when I would write to Brendan, I would send him jokes. So you could, Brendan really likes Harry Potter. So that's what, if you are going to write to them, don't do it because you only want a letter back and then you're going to be mad at them if you don't get one. Then you're not doing it for the right reason. So, all right, I'm going to call this to a close because now it's 11:45 my time. And I have at 1 p.m. we'll be live in MAM Gossip to go over the next 2 episodes of Making a Murderer. Excellent point, Lynn. They're all letters are read by the staff before they read them. And I do advise you on your letter somewhere also write your return address, because the way your letter gets ripped open by staff, maybe your return address will get destroyed and they won't be able to read it. So write your return address in your letter as well. Still doesn't mean you're going to get a letter back, but do that just in case. And you know, you can't send them stuff with glitter on it and stickers and, you know, anything like that. Just, you can type a letter on your computer and print that out and send it. It can be handwritten. I have before with Brendan and even with Stephen, I've been able to send pictures that, like, when I was printing it off the computer and, you know, adding a picture in what I was writing. So you can do that. So, all right, I'm going to go so I can post this stuff also in MAM Gossip and get the screenshots of the filing so I can post that so people can read it for themselves too. And then we will be live at 1 o'clock, so in approximately 2 hours in MAM Gossip. And we are on episodes 7 and 8 of part 1 of Making a Murderer. We've been trying to do 2 episodes a day. So we're on 7 and 8 today, and we'll do 9 and 10 tomorrow, and then Monday next week we'll start on part 2. I'm out. Thank you everybody for joining me on this, and thank you everybody who continues to believe in Stephen and Brendan's innocence. And as soon as we hear that either the state if the state responds again, or the judge rules, the court rules, we'll bring that to you as soon as we can get it. All right. Investigation continues. See you all soon.